Alright, so what's going on, everybody? Um, if you are a part of my class, I have um, lists for you for materials. Okay, so I kind of have them written out here, and these will be on the board for when we're actually in class. But because the snow day today, I wanted to make a video to kind of go over this with you so you're not totally lost when we get back to class. Also, I'm going to post this to my YouTube, so if you're watching on YouTube, you can do this yourself, but you can pick your own materials. So you don't have to use my list here. I have them named like Dungeons and Dragons lists, so it's like the Dungeoneers pack, and then you have this list of things and all these tools that everybody can use. That's more geared toward my classroom setting. But again, so if you're at home, or even my class, my students, if you want to do this on your own time, also very cool, and you can choose your own materials. Okay, so what we're working with here is the scientific method. Okay, I believe that art and science are very related in a lot of ways. Okay, and we're going to use the scientific method to try to create a new process for creating art. Okay, kids in my class, I know you guys don't know that many forms of art yet. A lot of you, this is your first art class. That is totally fine. But some of you on YouTube, maybe you know some different kinds of art, and you can kind of innovate in this way. But the main thing I want to stress to my class is not all art has to be two-dimensional. Okay, I'm going to show you a lot of two-dimensional paintings that I've done on canvas and paper. I'm sorry. But it doesn't have to be that. You can make sculptures. Okay, you can make whatever it is. It can be a happening, which is a kind of performance art that only happens one time, and just the only time you can see it is if you were there at that time. So that's just one example of how you can make something that's not just two-dimensional. So anyway, we're going through the scientific method, and I have some materials here that I've chosen for mine. I have just regular school glue. I have India ink. I was running out, so I got some more. So I got some India ink. I have Coca-Cola. Okay, so these are going to be my 3 ingredients. I suggest you use 3 so that you can make a good question and a hypothesis here. So again, if you're on YouTube, then you can see, or you can make your own hypothesis no matter what. My students in class, though, you guys will come up with a hypothesis as a group. Okay, so I have 2 to 3 per group, and I'm going to give you time in class to think about your questions and hypothesis once you get your list that I've assigned you. So if you get the Dungeoneers pack, I'm going to give you time in class to think on your own, get your own questions, hypotheses, and plans, maybe some process ideas. So you're going to do that on your own, and then bring it to your group, and then pitch your hypothesis and question to your group. And then as a group, you guys will use the same hypothesis, but test it differently. So you're going to come up with your own processes for one hypothesis. And then at what did I say? Did I say process for hypothesis? I hope so. And at the end, you guys will present as a group, and you'll say, we had this hypothesis, but I tested it this way, and I tested it this way, and I tested it this way, for an example. Okay? So, again, if you're at home, you can do this as well. So, anyway, enough of the chit-chat. Let's get into my experiment here. So, I wanted to go over it with you guys so it's not a surprise when we actually get to do it in class. And again, I wanted to post it on YouTube so people can kind of see this and kind of, it's just a good way to make a plan. It's a way to get data for experimenting with your art. Okay, so my question here is, I'm going to say, what will happen when I mix Coca-Cola with India ink? Okay, so that's going to be my question. So I'm writing on this plastic thing, so it might not be legible. I got this plastic thing because I'm going to make a mess. So what will happen when I mix Coke and India ink? I'm just going to say ink for simplicity. It doesn't have to be that specific ink. Okay, so my hypothesis here, I have written under it, don't be too narrow. Again, for my class, I want your hypothesis to be able to be tested different ways. Okay, so keep that in mind. For my hypothesis, I am going to be narrow. I just don't want you to be, so you can test it different ways. Again, on YouTube, you could do it however you would like, or my students in your free time, you can do it however you like. And you can get this is just I made this, but you can find all kinds of worksheets online for the scientific method. They're all a little different, but it's basically the same idea, as long as you have most of these steps here. So my hypothesis is the carbonation from the Coca-Cola is going to show up. It's going to make bubbles in the ink. And if they pop, I think it'll leave some negative space. So I'm going to say makes bubbles. Sorry, me writing is shaking the camera. Makes bubbles in the ink. Okay. I'm just going to leave it like that for now. You can flesh this out a little more. You can be more descriptive, more specific, so on and so forth. I'm just going to do this for now for the simplicity of this test here. Okay. So now we're moving on to the plan and research stage. Research is big. I accidentally left it off when I made this, but research is huge. I'm actually going to write it in this black here so it shows up better. For my class and again on YouTube, you can what I want you to do is take the materials you have and research research common practices. For example, if you get watercolor in your pack, research how most people use watercolor. Of course, there's lots and lots of different watercolor techniques. So find out how most people use the material, but also kind of find its limitations. Okay, so if you want really opaque colors, maybe you won't want to pick watercolor, for example. Maybe get a gouache or acrylic paint. Okay, so that's just one example of how you can do some research by choosing the watercolor on your materials. Okay, so I would do some research on these things, but I mean, I don't think there's anything out there about Coca-Cola, but I've learned through research that it can eat corrosion off of battery acid, for example. I've seen people use India ink for calligraphy a lot. We know a lot of the common practices for glue. And again, I could research that, maybe find some different ways that people have used glue and some of the limitations. For example, I used school glue and not glue all. Okay, so this is a kind of a weaker version of Elmer's glue. The glue all is a stronger version. But I'm not using this for a binding agent, I'm using it for the white color and the way it will gloop up instead of using white acrylic paint, for example. And maybe through my testing I could substitute that out and see how that makes a difference. Okay, so that's all in the research step, and this is big. I know it kind of looks like a footnote here, but your research step is big, both in art and science, and whatever you're doing, you want to put the research in it. But something I'm seeing in my own life a lot, and I've seen other people do, if you're doing this on your own, don't get bogged down in the research. Okay, I wanted to paint minifigures, for example, and I spent hours and hours and hours watching minifigure painting tutorials and videos, and I watched hours of Miniacs and Squidmar minis, and even Jazza. But you learn way more from actually painting that mini than you do just watching videos. So paint a couple minis, watch a couple videos. Paint a couple minis using what you learned. I think that's a much better way to learn for that example, and I think for most examples, you want to mix research with experience. Okay, but for this, we want to do the research quickly. We're not going to spend a day on the research or anything like that, but it is an important step. And then plan. I'm just gonna mix these together. I'm going to do one where I mix them together and pour them. I'm writing kind of quickly here. Okay, and then I'm going to let's mix Coke and ink and pour that, and then put the glue on after. So I kind of want to see the differences there. Again, the research is also important on the Google slide that I've posted to my Google Classroom. The research has its own slide, so you use that for that portion, okay? Test. So this is where I'm going to talk about what I'm going to do in exactly which order. You can get very down to the bone with it and measure all these things out. I can get a tablespoon of glue, and I can get a full cup of Coca-Cola, or a whole bottle, or whatever it is, whatever, how many ounces, 20 fluid ounces. So you can get down and measure these things. The way I work, I'm not very analytical. I'm very much feeling and emotional type of person, so I just go with it and mix it together. But if you like to measure, if that's how you cook, then do that, okay? So on the back here, I have the creating a new process sheet. So it's basically a worksheet where over here you can put your order of materials, and then over here you can describe exactly what you did, and you can also put the outcome. Okay, so this is basically how you're acquiring your data. Okay, and I want you to use this data to inform what you like and don't like about your process that you're creating. Okay, so one way you could do this is you could put like glue here, and or I guess in order I'm going to do Coca-Cola here, and then ink in this box, and then glue in this box. That's one way. Or if you plan on doing a ton of tests, you can do Coke, ink, glue, okay? And then over here is where you do your description. I will put Coke, then ink, then glue. I'm going to put mix and pour. Okay, that can be one. But again, I can also say Coke, ink, glue, describe what I do with each one of those, and then maybe underneath that, I can put result. And then this can be the result. So that's a couple different ways you can do this. I don't care how you do it. Whichever makes sense to you is totally fine, as long as you can describe to me how you did it. What's very important about science and the scientific method is that your test can be replicated. So however you have to write it down for other people to be able to replicate it, and maybe we can add that onto the assignment. Maybe we can add on where you finish your thing, and when you get the result you want, you give this to someone else, and then they have to replicate your test. That could be really interesting, or for artists, and for class, for science, whatever it is. Okay. Something I do want to point out here, and now that I'm thinking about it, obviously we're not doing anything super scientific, right? We're not talking about electrons and bonds and all these things, right? We're just using the scientific method. Okay? So I don't want to confuse anybody and say that we're doing all kinds of crazy science or anything. We're just using this method, and I think that this method gives you a good structure for creating and recreating a piece of artwork. Okay, so if I have this structure and I make this specific plan and I know exactly how to recreate it, then I can make that piece of art again. I'm so bad about just throwing stuff together and then I'm like, man, that's cool, how did I do that? Okay, so that's why I like this structure here. Okay, and again, I do think that art and science are related in a lot of ways. So I'm not going to fill out this test one here. Remember that your data set is back here, and it's a wordy data set, not really a numbers one. You could find a way to do numbers. Again, you can always measure. That's not something I do, but you can measure teaspoons and cups and all those things. And in my classroom, we do have all of that. Okay. So observe. So this is your stage where you're telling me and everyone who ever reads this what you're seeing. Okay. So for my example, we're not going to see the result, because it needs time to dry, and it takes forever to dry. I know from the past. It takes forever to dry. But we're going to see that it's not going to make many bubbles in the ink. But when it dries, the ink cracks. So I'm going to go ahead and write that just because I already know that from the past. So ink cracks when dry. Of course, again, that's from my past experience with one form of India ink. Okay, I know that's this one. So this ink cracked. For all I know, this ink may not crack. I don't know. So that is its own experiment in its own right. You could go through iterations with each ingredient and do different brands of an ingredient and see the differences there. So you could see how you can go way down the rabbit hole with this, which is totally fine. If you're into that, absolutely do that. Or you can kind of go narrow and just, I wouldn't say assume some things, but you can go narrow and just focus on what happens with the Coke and the ink with this brand. Okay? So down here is my process. We haven't done the test yet, so I'm not going to write in the process, but process again is just where you're explaining this is the process that I liked. And you go through here, make it very clear, so again, it can be replicated. That's what we want in this process. We want a very clear, I measured a half a tablespoon of India ink, I measured a tablespoon of glue, whatever you did, be very clear on how you mixed it, or how you measured it, whatever you got to do, okay? I know for this, I don't want to mix too much based on my past experience. I don't want to mix too much because it'll just blur it, okay? It'll basically just be black. But I want kind of nuance in there, so I'm going to just mix a little bit and then pour it and see what happens there, okay? So that's what I would say in this process. That's one of the things I would say is I mixed it, but not a ton because I didn't want to mess up the colors. I just poured for half a second with Coca-Cola, and I dropped 2 drops of ink and 3 drops of glue. So whatever your process is, the one that you ended up liking the most, make sure you're very clear about what it is here, okay? And then your conclusion in a scientific method is bringing everything together. You're saying, this was my question, this was my hypothesis, was your hypothesis right, or was your hypothesis wrong, okay? You're going to talk about your plan and why it worked, what you liked about it, and because it's an art project, you're going to critique it as well in this conclusion, okay? And again, you can add slides on the Google Slides that I posted on Google Classroom. Yeah, for the conclusion, you want to talk about those things. Whether it worked, whether it didn't. Oh, and yeah, again, you want to critique it. I like this art piece. I like the composition because of this. Again, use those principles and elements of art and design that we've been talking about in class and critique your artwork, okay? And maybe you can also get other people's opinions. Put that in here too. That could be interesting if other people critiqued it and match. You tell them your hypothesis and they tell you if it matches up. That could be interesting. That's in science. That's called peer review, when people can test your hypothesis and also prove it to be true using your test. Then that's a way to peer review. Okay, peer review is where other people in your field agree with you, or they don't even have to agree, but that's when they double check your work to make sure you're either correct or right. So they don't have to agree to peer review. They can disagree as well. So that is it for this. I hope I made that pretty clear. I know there's a couple different ways that you can do some of these things, but I wanted to make sure I went over it with you, okay? So here at the end of the video, I'm going to do my first practice, okay? Alright, so right here I have 2 just regular copy pieces of paper. I'm going to use both of these. Normally I would use watercolor paper, but I don't have any on me right now. All of it's in the classroom. So I'm just going to double up these pieces of paper. Honestly, I could go through and get some tape and tape them together. Yeah, I'm not gonna do that right now. But there's some things I could do if I wasn't videoing right now. I could maybe get some different paper, so on and so forth, whatever it is. But I just wanted to do this experiment one good time with you and kind of show you how I would do my process that I was creating. So I'm going to start with Coca-Cola, okay? So I love using sodas. I'll show you a couple of examples here. I don't know why. It really doesn't do anything, but I just love using stuff like that in my art pieces. I always think that it's going to do something cool and it doesn't. But I'm just going to pour for a couple seconds of Coke. Okay. And this is like a throwaway glass that I got at WKU, but you can hear that bubbling. Okay, so that's just a bunch of Coca-Cola, okay? I put a little more in there than I should have, especially for this area, but that's fine. Maybe it'll work out extra well, maybe it'll be stupid, I don't know. I'm going to open up this India ink. I haven't opened it yet, but it looks like it has a dropper. Yeah, okay, so I'm going to put this over the paper. It might drop a little bit on the paper, but that's okay. Alright, so I'm going to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, I'm going to have to get some more ink. Okay, so again, you can count that. I'm not much of an analytical person. I was counting and then I stopped counting. If you're in my class, please count. I'd like for people to replicate it. If you're not in my class, then you can do whatever you want. And I'm going to go ahead and put the glue in here. I don't think I put enough ink in here, but we'll see. Again, I'm testing this with you right now, but this is just one way that I can test this. I can test this probably 10 different ways and see what my favorite one is. So far, I think it's really cool the way the glue is kind of sitting, and I can kind of pick it up a little bit. So I'm just going to give this 3 mixes around. Okay, like that. Look, it kind of looks like a Pocky stick a little bit. Okay, I'm just going to put that right here. Now, I have protected my workspace. I have this tablecloth down. I have this plastic lid here that I'm using. Protect your workspace. Don't make a mess, especially if you're using something like Coke, okay? Sorry, my dog's scratching over there. Alright, so, sorry about the sound, but he's an animal. I'm going to go ahead and pour this. Not to keep you in suspense, I'm just trying to move everything. So, I'm going to go ahead and pour this, and we will see what happens. So, I'm going to go from this corner all the way to this corner. So, unfortunately, because of the way I poured it, it kind of went out of where I'm working. But that could be cool. Maybe it could work out and end up looking really cool, like a wash maybe across here. So we'll see what happens. I'm going to let this sit for a day or two and let it dry. I know that it takes a long time to dry. So I'll see what happens here, and I'll report back to you guys and put it in my observations and let my hypothesis, let you know if it was real or not. We'll see, okay? So this looks like a mess right now, but we'll see soon how it turned out. I'll post it on my Instagram, people on YouTube, so that you can see it. And then my kids in class, I'll just show it to you when we're done, okay? So, now that my experiment's done, there's something else I was supposed to do. Oh, I'm going to show you some of my artworks from the past. Okay, I'm going to have to go grab them. Okay, I'm going to show you the ink and Coke ones first. Okay, ink and Coke ones first. So here is one of my tests that I did in college. And this is, again, this is ink and Coca-Cola with glue. And I think this turned out really cool. It's a really cool one, I think. Okay, so that's one I did in college. Again, this one, I'm doing it a little different because I've already done it. Here's a bigger version. I think this one is also cool. I think I like the white more on the other one. I wish I could show this more, but it's so big I can't get it all on the camera. But yeah, I love the contrast with the glue and the ink so much. And I liked it better on the smaller one. I feel like it's kind of more gestural. What I like about this process is it takes my hand out of the experiment. Okay, so with a paintbrush, you can see those strokes, right? But with something like this, you can't see any brush strokes, right? This looks like it's an accident, like this shouldn't have happened, right? So I'm kind of taking my hand out of it, and that's popular in some forms of art, taking the artist's hand out of it and letting the science or the nature or whatever it is in the situation do the work, okay? And then one more thing I'm going to show you. This is, again, how I use some of my experiments in my artwork, okay? So this is an artwork I created. It was actually over the quarantine. And I wrote a short story And I could talk for an hour about how this relates to the short story. But what I want to talk about here are these orange splatters. Okay? So, the way I created those is I poured Dr. Pepper. Look, see again with the sodas. I poured Dr. Pepper onto the canvas. And that's insane, right? You've never heard someone do that, right? I haven't, at least. So I poured Dr. Pepper onto the canvas and then took spray paint right up next to it and sprayed directly into it. And it made these splatters. And I thought it looked really cool. So again, I've done stuff like this in the past, so now I know if I use Dr. Pepper or whatever liquid, it doesn't have to just be Dr. Pepper, but I know with Dr. Pepper it works, that if I spray directly into it, it'll make this cool splatter. Okay, so if you have any questions, make sure you leave them in the comment section down below. My class, you can ask me in class or on Google Classroom. You know I respond pretty well on there. So let me know what you think. If you like this, if you think it's cool, what do you think about this art piece? And I hope that you guys enjoy using the scientific method to give you a structure while creating a new process for creating art. Okay? So remember, think outside of the box, and it's very beneficial to take skills and knowledge from one area of expertise and bring it to something else. For example, staying in the art world, I guess, you can take poetry and find a way to put poetry into an assignment like this. For example, I could have written all over this piece of paper with calligraphy or whatever it is, and then done this experiment. That's one example. What if I'm into photography? I can wait till this dries, and I can somehow use the rule of thirds and make an interesting composition with the photography. So the photography is the art more than the piece of paper. So that's two examples, and those are still art examples. But again, using science, bringing science into the art world for our class is one way that we can use a skill or a process that we already know and incorporate it into our art. And I think that cross-curricular work is really good, and I think it leads to a lot of innovation. So that's why we want to do this assignment. We want to work together as a class, that collaboration, okay? And your communication. You want to be able to communicate how you created your process. All right? So thanks for sticking around, guys. If you're on YouTube, remember to like, comment, subscribe for more content like this. I am an art teacher, so I do like to do stuff like this from time to time. And then my students, please turn in your work. That'd be awesome. All right, take it easy.